Hello and welcome to the Cellar Door. I'm George and today I am in beautiful Gembrook, home to Gembrook Hill Wines and Melbourne Gin Company, which I will be getting stuck into a little later on, but first up, the wines. Let's go. Nestled behind the Dandenong Ranges, an hour east of Melbourne, Gembrook's unique cold climate makes it a perfect spot for some of the oldest vineyards in the Upper Yarra sub-region. And it's a fittingly cold and wet day to see what makes this place so special. I am here in sunny Gembrook with Andrew of Gembrook Hill. How are you?
I'm very well, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Sunny Gembrook.
Yeah, look, I don't mind the rain, it's very beautiful. Tell us a little bit about these vines behind us.
Well, we're looking at a vineyard that was planted by my parents in 1983. And so where we are at Gembrook, it's actually the southernmost vineyard in the Yarra Valley. So this site's quite different in its climate. It tends to be a little bit wetter than the lower Yarra Valley.
Say.
I know, the rainfall of about 1,200 mils, which is substantially wetter. So you see these vines, they're really happy, they're growing all out. And that's quite typical of this area. So really very vigorous vines. We're on red soils, volcanic clay loam, which happily is quite free draining. And the vineyard was planted in 1983. So this place was a cow paddock back in the day.
Right. So it's got some good fertile soils going on.
The vines are on own roots for the majority. We've just started to change that a little bit with some new plantings on American rootstock.
Yeah, so own roots is the European
Yeah, so it's
clone?
the Vitis vinifera. And literally when my dad planted the vineyard, he put sticks in the ground from a neighbouring vineyard down in Montana Estate. And literally put some sticks in the ground and they flourished. And in the 90s, it was quite wet as well. And so the vineyard is actually also unirrigated, which is sort of dry grown, which some people take a lot of value in, and that works really well for us.
And so what kinds of grapes are you planting here?
So we're
Mostly.
planted to Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, so three classics.
They go quite well in a bottle of bubbles, don't they?
Oh yeah, so we do the Chardonnay two ways. We do the Chardonnay into bubbles, what we call bubbles. It's a Blanc de Blanc, method champenoise. And so we ripen quite late. We ripen up to a month later than the lower Yarra Valley.
Right.
And it's not that we're a lot higher in altitude. We're about 300 metres, which is not the highest vineyard in the Yarra Valley, but it's getting to higher vineyards. This southern end of the valley is a lot cooler, and so things happen a bit later than the rest of the valley.
And so what sort of flavour does that give to your...
Chardonnay naturally has quite a lot of power, and we pick early to preserve the natural acidity for the bubbles. So we've got power and restraint and elegance and length. I feel like I've got to talk quite loud over the rain. It's like, how about this?
Do you know what?
Summer.
Why don't you show me the bubbles and we can talk about it over a glass?
That sounds
It's like
much
a good
better.
idea.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Great, let's go. Before we head up to the house for our formal tasting, I'm in for a special treat. So we're going to disgorge.
Yeah, so disgorging, we've borrowed a lot of champagne making words from the French. And disgorging basically describes the process where we prepare the wine for its final bottling. So the way that we make bubbles is we make a table wine, we pick the grapes early at about 10% alcohol, we ferment them, turn them into wine. In our case, we ferment them in a stainless steel tank, and then we run it into a large format French oak, so like a 500 litre barrel that we call a puncheon. With the bubbles, it's not about the oak flavour, it's about the texture. So we do an élevage, which is another French word that we've borrowed to describe like the growing up of our children, which is how we view our wines a little bit. And so basically it grows up.
You're about to behead one of your children, is that?
I'm about to bring it into the real world. And so essentially it spends about 6 or 7 months in the puncheon, and then we basically bottle it. And when we bottle it into a crown seal, which is this seal here. And as we bottle it, we add a little bit of yeast and a little bit of sugar.
Into the bottle.
Into the bottle.
And that's the method champenoise.
That's the method champenoise. So the yeast basically consume that small amount of sugar, the byproduct and alcoholic fermentation ensues. The byproduct of fermentation is alcohol, a little bit of heat, which dissipates and goes away with time, and carbon dioxide. And with the crown seal on, that's how you get the bubbles in bubbles. It's really simple.
It's time to disgorge.
Rock and roll.
I think that deserves an instant replay. Super slow motion, please.
Yeah.
I feel like I just won Formula One racing.
Oh, it's better than that. This is the real thing.
That smells so good. Cheers.
Cheers.
That's a good time.
Happy days.
Yeah. Cheers again.
Yeah.
That means another sip, of course.
Of course.
Well, that was fabulous. We should probably finish this off. And now on to the formal tasting. So Andrew's taking me up to the family house to taste a grape perfectly suited to the colder climate of Gembrook. So this is a cooler climate.
It's a cool
flavour.
climate wine, so everything's hand-picked at Gembrook. And one of the classic features that we like, because it's a 13-acre vineyard, one of the things that makes it special is that it's the winemakers that actually do all the vineyard work.
Yeah, so you're very involved from...
Well, 80% of the
every
winemaking
stage.
is done in the vineyard.
Yeah.
And so we grow these grapes to make the best wine that we can, which is, it's not chateau cash flow, and which is a term that I first heard years ago in the Hunter Valley. And the Sauvignon Blanc we treat like a grown-up. So we, again, that term of élevage, once we've made the wine, we let it rest in tank and in barrels for the full year. And so the cool climate gives it great natural acidity and freshness and energy. And then that extra time in the barrel gives it the texture and it fills it out a bit so that it's quite a satisfying drink. It's got a great long flavour, it'll open up. And
People do associate Sauv Blanc with that sort of very light, like very easy, just chuck it back kind of.
well,
Or is that just
no.
people I know?
There's nothing wrong with a wine that's easy to drink, and I call that smashability.
Yeah,
and I think the key to great drinking is smashability. All the wines, no matter how cheap or how expensive they are, if they've got that aspect, then you're not going to complain. It's going to be a great drink, right? So we want that. So this is the new release, the 2019. So typically we've aged the wine for a year in our cellar before we release it. It keeps on going. There's a bit of a citrusy element in the wine, and we often think of that as a grapefruit sort of citrus edge. And you'll find that
That kind of delicate.
yeah, it's a little filigree of citrus that runs through the palate, and you see that in the Chardonnay, and you see that in the Pinot Noir as well. So it's really the site that's talking through the wines. And in the winery, we're really just turning it into grape juice, and then it's not adding chemicals and stuff to it. We just let it ferment, do its thing.
Yeah, it's delicious. And why stop there? On to the Chardonnay. So your Sauv Blanc is under screw cap, a Stelvin.
That's
top,
right.
But your Chardonnay is a cork?
It's it's known as a diam, so it's a natural cork. It's undergone a process that basically reduces any possibility of cork taint, which ruins lots of wines. And it's more elastic. It forms a better seal in the bottle. Back in the day, we used to use natural cork, 100% natural cork, and those wines were quite permeable to air, so we'd lose a lot of wines to oxidation on its way to making vinegar, which is
delicious.
past the stage of drinkability. So the Diams are really good for the Chardonnays and the Pinots. It does allow a little bit of passage of air, so the wine does age a little bit, whereas the screw cap is a hard seal and retains real great freshness with the wine. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers again. That is silky.
It is, isn't it? It's all about texture. I think that's the key to smashability, and that's where that barrel age.
That's your scientific.
I love it. Yeah. It's like a little straw poll, and if it goes down easily, that's smashable.
Yeah. After the break, it's on to the Reds, and then on to Melbourne for some gin.
That we've been making. First vintage was made by Ian in Hawthorne, where we used to live, inner city Melbourne, in 1989, and so and he made it in the garage at home.
Yeah.
So there's this whole thing called a garagiste, which are a movement of French winemakers who are making their wines in their garage.
Is that a real term?
It's a thing, local winemaking.
Yeah.
the real deal. And we've graduated from the garage.
Your dad was one of the original garagistes?
He certainly was. And so this is really light in colour. It's really,
yeah, it's an amazing colour.
and
It's like pale but ruby.
It really is. It's one of these sorts of wines where we've told that we always want to see our finger through a Pinot Noir when you put your finger behind the glass. And it's very aromatic. These red soils we're on, combined now with almost 40 years of vine age, we're starting to get some intensity, lightness of colour, but when you taste it, it's quite a different story in your mouth. It's quite full flavoured without being overpowering. And we call this a bit of a feminine wine style rather than a heavy masculine sort of wine. So it's really aromatic, but still quite fulfilling and, dare I say, smashable.
It's got that, like that cherry kind of sweetness, but then that really beautiful savoury kind of finish. And smashable, as you said.
Oh, totally. I mean, they're lithe. I kind of view them as like marathon runners. They're sort of lithe and nimble, and they're for the long haul. They're not going to sort of like get really massive and sort of like some wines don't age very well. They go to run to fat a little bit.
Yeah, they go to seed.
Yeah, so it's a bit more of a marathon runner than like a bodybuilder, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a Steve Moneghetti kind of
Yeah, totally.
vibe.
What we're going to try here is the first release of this wine. We've called it the JKM, which is short for June Catherine Marks. June, my mum, and co-founder of Gembrook Hill. And so this is a tribute to June. In 2014, we made a planting of vines on American rootstocks. Now, the reason we did that, in the Yarra Valley now there's phylloxera. And so as a bit of a risk mitigation strategy, we've started planting some Pinot on rootstocks. There's different types of rootstocks too that give you different properties in the wine. By planting this, it allowed us to introduce a different sort of different character into the Gembrook range of wines, which I thought would just introduce some complexity. And it also eventually allowed us to produce 2 different wines, which is really exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
So this wine, as a tribute to my mother, who's a bit of a classic, she's no shrinking lily. And so this wine is...
she is just off camera, so you're watching your PCQs.
That's a little bit. But she's someone who's a bit more an exuberant person who lives life to the fullest. And so I wanted this wine to be an exuberant expression of Pinot Noir.
Oh yeah. Get that strawberry.
Yeah, it's really perfumed. It's a baby, but it's fine. It's different vintage to the last one. So this is the 18 versus the 19, and I think that plays out a little bit in the wine. It's got a little bit more age to it, but it's got a long way to go.
It's still got some depth to it.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a lot of complexity. The last in the range is the 2018 IJM Pinot, so that's Ian James Marks. It's the reference to my dad who died in 2017. And so it felt very fitting to make a tribute to him from the vines that he planted. To bring it full circle, this wine is a blend, sort of 70-30 of the oldest vines in the vineyard and also the youngest vines that we planted in 2014. Which he helped plant as well. And it's a bit that urobos, which is the Greek word to describe the snake eating its own tail, which is kind of like that signal of eternity or foreverness or whatever. And I think it's all about connection to land, and that's what winemaking really at its fundamental is sort of like having a connection. There's great wines all over the world, but it's what we're doing with our patch of dirt.
The unique approach and history.
And trying to express something really special, So my father was a bit more of a humble chap, and so there's no new oak in this wine. It's all about the old oak. So it's actually not about the oak or the winemaking artifact at all. It's 100% destemmed as we make the Gembrook Hill Pinot. It's all about the terroir, which was Dad's passion, was growing the grapes and being out in the vineyard. So it's a nice. I think it's a really nice tribute to him. Yeah,
it's lovely. The wines pair with your parents' approaches.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing them with me.
It's been a great pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's a good one.
That was a good one. While we're out here at Gembrook, I really wanted to show you our stills. This is actually the home of the Melbourne Gin Company. So
MGC.
So I reside in Collingwood, in the heart of darkness. And And this is where the MGC began. So it's actually conceived in Collingwood, but it's made in the Yarra Valley. And so while we're not open to the public, this is the heart of our production.
They are gorgeous.
Yeah, you can see the hand-beaten copper marks, hammer marks in them. And what makes them quite special is they are stills that were designed for making perfume.
Right. Well, I guess gin has got that sort of aromatic botanicals thing happening.
There's a lot of crossovers.
I'll let you talk about that.
There's a lot of crossovers between gin making and perfume making. A lot of the botanicals that we use are quite similar.
Right.
And these stills have a water bath that surrounds what I call the Chamber of Secrets. And that's where we put the botanicals. It's just like a journey into alchemy. It's really fun. Our initial dry gin, which we started producing in 2013, comprises of 11 botanicals, and they're all distilled individually and then blended together in what I call a winemaking approach. The other really important facets that go into our gin, which is pertinent today, is the rainwater. And so we use natural rainwater that we collect on the winery roof, and we use that to break back the gin, and the quality of that water is unbelievable. We're in the catchment zone for Melbourne water, which is really good. There's no chlorine in it. All we do is filter it. We don't put it through any carbon. Yeah, so despite the fact that it's raining on us today, we love it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be rained on if it means it's going to get me some gin. We've left Gembrook and the wines and come into Siglo, a rooftop institution in the heart of Melbourne, to try some of Andrew's gin. Up an old staircase and encased with industrial steel and glass, Siglo has great views over Spring Street and Parliament House, and a delicious array of Andrew's gin. First off, Andrew's walking me through some of his favourites. So, Andrew, winemaking wasn't keeping you busy enough?
Well, I'm sure on your travels you've met lots of winemakers, and one thing you learn with winemakers is that they have broad interests in lots of different drinks. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me one day, maybe I should have a crack at making gin myself.
Was this after a Martini Tuesday
definitely.
in particular?
Yeah. And the thing about martinis is it's a great drink, whether you're stirring them down at home or, and I remember my grandfather stirring martinis on the mantelpiece. It can be as elegant and refined or not as you like.
Yeah.
And that's the appeal to me, I guess. Hence started a journey into alchemy, which is where we find ourselves today.
And this is the gold you created?
This is the gold. It's the MGC. So the dry gin, that's our first gin, and it took me a year to develop the recipe. So there's 11 botanicals, and they're distilled individually, a winemaking approach to making gin. Yeah. And then they're blended together. If you were to describe the botanicals, there's the high notes and the base notes, as there are in perfumes. So the high notes are like the citrus, like we have grapefruit is our citrus. The fundamental building block of any gin is juniper. So we have juniper berries. But grapefruit is a beautiful citrus. We have coriander seed, which is citrusy at the same time as giving you a bit like a sweet hay. It's a beautiful aromatic. And the other citrus is orange. So we use organic navel orange. The last citrus we use is I think we're the only gin in the world to use it. Are you ready for a secret? It's called honey myrtle, and it's from the Melaleuca family.
Is that a citrus?
When you distill the leaves, it tastes like...
Right, yes.
It tastes like and smells like Vicks Vapor Drops. You could rub a little bit on your chest before you went to bed and everything would be fine in the morning.
Medicine.
It's medicine. Well, yeah, mother's a little helper. When I came up with the idea of making gin, I had 3 drinks in mind, and I'm a big fan of the classics. So I love martinis, I love GNTs, and I think that's how most people drink their gin. And I think Negronis, because we like to get the party started.
Yeah, and you've bottled the party.
Oh, we have bottled it. This is hot off the press, in fact. This is our bottled Negroni.
And then, of course, single shot. The
single shot. So this came into being 5 years after we produced our first gin, and we're not really in a hurry here. We like the slow approach, and less is more. You can't please everyone, so you may as well please yourself, right?
Yeah.
So we really wanted to have juniper tasting through a drink all the way through. We've got 7 botanicals rather than 11.
Okay.
And the real fundamental difference is it's a different production process. So the gin is actually distilled in a single distillation.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks, George. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you too. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm so sorry. All right, well, my signature cheers can't work every time. Now I'm heading inside, where brand ambassador Hugh is giving me a gin cocktail masterclass. So get out your notepads and glasses.
Shall we drink some gin?
Let's drink some gin.
Excellent. So the first one you're going to taste is our dry gin. It's quite kind of elegant, quite easy drinking, quite soft, I find, for straight gin.
Thank you.
So have a little nose of that, and I will start making you a quite delicious gin and tonic.
I do love a quite delicious gin and tonic. So this is the one with lower alcohol?
Yeah, so 42%, 11 different ingredients. We've got some grapefruit and rosemary in there that Andrew mentioned, and we quite like to lean on that as a garnish.
I could certainly just drink this straight.
It's just got some Cappy dry tonic. I like to do about 1 part gin to about 3 parts tonic. And then a lovely little sprig of rosemary.
Yeah, I like that.
And some ruby red grapefruit. Lovely splash of colour in there.
It's very summery.
Yeah, see what you think of that one.
Thank you.
So you get that lovely kind of rosemary on the nose, a bit of fresh grapefruit on the palate, nice and juicy. And then the next one we have is our single shot. A little bit higher in alcohol, 47.4, more juniper as Andrew mentioned, so lots of kind of piney, resinous flavour in there. We use a few new botanicals in here as well, so we've got some bergamot orange, green cardamom, leatherwood honey from Tasmania, so the actual honey, and also some lavender from the Yarra Valley as well. So it's quite kind of punchy, really aromatic. I guess what I describe as that kind of more modern style of gin, as opposed to the dry gin, which is a little bit more kind of classic.
The classic
refined.
kind of. Not used to drinking on my own, Hugh.
Maybe I'll have this gin and tonic. So this one I really love in a gin and tonic. Because of that extra alcohol, it really kind of carries across the tonic. You don't lose the gin to the tonic, which I think is a real shame. I'm sure we've all experienced that once or twice.
I think my gin pours are generally strong enough that it's
That's great, I love that. You don't have to concern yourself with losing the gin. And again, we're doing some Cappy Dry here. But yeah, because of that extra alcohol, you get lots and lots of punch, lots of juniper, and that real citrus backbone for the gin, I find, works really, really nicely. I also get a lot of cardamom on the nose.
I don't know what exactly cardamom tastes like, but I feel like I'm getting that lavender note.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very unique scent for a gin.
Yeah, and then we've got a little bit of thyme in here. So we don't actually use thyme in the gin, but I just find it's a really delicious pairing with all the other botanicals we've got. And then some orange. So we use orange and bergamot orange in the gin. So maybe I'll just drink this one.
Yeah, go on.
You know what?
Good time.
Yeah, I think I did all right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Next, martini time.
So a martini is a very simple drink in theory. Quite kind of interesting because yes, there's only really 2 ingredients. We've got gin and vermouth, but because it's so simple, there's not a lot to hide behind. So it's very easy to notice when you have a martini that's not been made properly, and it'll definitely let you know about it. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to do 45 mils of gin. Now you don't have to have all this fancy cocktail gear. If you are playing along at home, you can definitely make it in, a coffee mug. If you're really desperate. So the next thing we're going to do is add some vermouth. So we're actually using Maidenized dry vermouth. So again, lovely local Victorian vermouth here. This one's a little bit more, I guess, botanically punchy than your kind of standard classic dry vermouths. Just a little bit more flavor, a little bit more intensity. And what I'm making you is I guess what I'd call a wet martini. So it's got a little bit more vermouth, kind of softens everything out a little bit. So we've got 15 mils of vermouth in there. So then we're going to add plenty of ice. And stir that down. Make sure it's lovely and cold. And one of the other great things I like about martinis is they're almost like a fingerprint. So everyone tends to like martinis their own way. It's quite a kind of specific drink. Every time you make a martini, you're trying to make the perfect martini, but it's impossible to make. And especially with people that are martini fans, people will have quite strong preferences about how they have their martinis, which is quite a lot of fun too. We've just made you a really classic kind of dry martini or semi-dry martini here. No olive brine, nothing else. There's 2 options when it comes to martinis with garnish as well. Obviously, olives most famously, or a little bit of citrus. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a little bit of grapefruit peel. You'll get those lovely oils on top. And again, as we use grapefruit in the gin, and then I'm just going to pop that around the edge of the glass so it gets all over your hands, and you get that lovely kind of grapefruit scent as you drink it. So what do you think of that?
My scent can match my beverage.
Ode to Melbourne.
It's beautiful, yeah. That's lovely how the orange scent kind of greets you as you dive in.
Yeah, so it's quite kind of soft, textural. I mean, hopefully I've made it well.
You pass.
But yeah, I find as a classic kind of martini, the dry gin's really, really nice because it is kind of just soft, textural. That kind of thing.
It is very soft. I would
it's
definitely
just kind of
use that
it's
word.
Velvety almost.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fun. A few of those, you'll fall right over.
And now, the world's easiest Negroni.
So obviously this is pre-batched. All you need to do with this bottled Negroni is literally pour it over ice like
Look at that. Magic.
And it is ready to go. If you would like, you can have a little orange wedge or a little orange zest in there too. But yeah, it is literally that easy.
And the grand finale, the fabled Negroni float.
All this gin and ice cream.
I know, right?
I mean,
With the Negroni float,
Yes.
you can do this with just the dry gin and some Campari as well. What I'm going to do is with this pre-batch Negroni, we're just going to do about 60 mils of the Negroni in there. And then a little bit of ice. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to add some ice cream. So this is some really lovely Fior di Latte gelato from Spring Street Grocer. So very, very delicious. Just look at that. Oh, it's melting everywhere. We're going to add a scoop of ice cream on top there, if I can get that out somehow. Here we go. And you just want a little bit of ice beforehand to make sure that floats. And then we're just topping it up with some blood orange soda here. So you want to just top it up really slowly, get that lovely head there. And a couple of straws. And just a couple of blueberries on there too. And that is our Negroni spider.
that is
Or Negroni
so
float.
good. I have been doing this show for 5 years and I have never thought of putting ice cream in a gin cocktail.
Well, I think we've got about 3 different ice cream drinks at least now that we've done over the years. So yeah, there's definitely, the world is your oyster when it comes to making ice cream drinks. The only one I think probably wouldn't work would be a martini.
Olive oil ice cream.
Oh, there we go.
See?
Should be
Here,
on
have a drink.
society.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
It's even better than a Fanta spider. Well, I started the day with Blanc de Blanc and I'm wrapping it up with Fior di Latte. And yes, this is the second Negroni float that I am drinking. They're amazing. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Hello and welcome to the Cellar Door. I'm George and today I am in beautiful Gembrook, home to Gembrook Hill Wines and Melbourne Gin Company, which I will be getting stuck into a little later on, but first up, the wines. Let's go.